Welcome back to the Privated podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Our guest today is Franca Comparetto. She's a CEO and co-founder of Cigar Sense Inc. It's the first unbiased recommendation service for cigars. She has over a decade of experience at Cisco in business operations and data governance. So she brought her expertise into consumer advocacy. So since 2014, Franca has been merging sensory science with technology to empower cigar lovers to trust their own preferences, not marketing hype. She's a strong advocate for sensor autonomy, ethical business models, and authentic consumer-company relationships. Welcome, Franca, to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Federico, for having me. I'm doing great. How about you?
I am doing great. This is a good day today. So, yeah, I'm doing amazing.
Awesome.
So, can you tell us about your journey from, you working at the European Commission and Cisco to then co-founding Cigar Sense?
Yeah, that's a long journey. So after some work experiences in other European countries, I ended up in Brussels. And I was very lucky, actually, to be able to work at the European Commission because it's a very, very interesting community there. You can imagine actually Brussels as a rather big village, but then that's when you exclude all the European workers, of course, there. And yes, it was very pleasant. So I've been assistant to the director of the anti-fraud unit, which was also very interesting. And during that work, I've also worked on my thesis, which was an interesting one that connected me later to the work I'm doing. And that was a thesis on consumer behavior, the behavior of consumers who like animal products but want their well-being. After the short experience at the European Commission, I moved on to Cisco. And with Cisco, I've been moving back to Italy and then to the US, where I actually then met the person who became my husband and co-founder of Cigar Sense. And then we just thought, out of my frustration that I can explain if you would like to, in cigars, we created Cigar Sense, which was really something to help other consumers like me find pleasure, sensory pleasure from cigars.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's a long journey, right? So I apologize if I kind of reduce it to just a single question, right? There's so many things to unpack, right? So you come from Italy, right?
Yes.
And then you now moved to the US, correct?
I moved to the US in end of 21. We moved to Italy, actually. We moved to
Nice.
Italy, and David continued also some of his consulting work from here. And now we are both working basically full-time on Cigar Sense from Italy. The company is still in the US. We do business with the US, which is the biggest market for cigars.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the dream, right? Because then you can live wherever you want, but still doing business in the US. Yes.
Yes, that's right. And we are able to do that now. And we are on a beautiful lake here in Italy. And, we're happy.
Nice. I mean, I can see the appeal of Italy over the US for sure. Yeah. It's a more romantic place overall.
Yes, but I love the US as well. And it gave me a lot. On top of my husband, of course, which is most important.
Right. It's a husband exporter country.
Are you in a similar situation, I guess?
Well, something similar happened to me, but so I'm Argentinian. I moved to Mexico 17 years ago, and then I was single, and then I met my wife to be here in Mexico, and we continued a relationship. Then I went back to Argentina, and then I went back to Mexico, and then we established we established as a couple here in Mexico, and yeah, I love it here. And same thing, right? Like I do business in the US, but for doing business, I think it's great, but there are a lot of, in my opinion, right, a lot of drawbacks to live full time in the US, and we prefer to stay in Mexico, right? So I'm traveling frequently, mostly to the Bay Area, right? Yeah, but for raising a kid, I think it's better Mexico.
I understand.
So yeah. Going back to Italy, what happened is that where I grew up in Monte Grande. Monte Grande is one of the biggest community of Italians outside of Italy, right? Or that's what I've been told, right? I don't know how true it is, right? So I was in the Italian society. It's a community, and they have a big building, and so what happened is that a lot of Italians moved to Monte Grande when it was just a train station and there was nothing there. So they basically moved as settlers, right? So they developed their life there, right? And they built shops, commerce. There were some were artisans, professionals, and basically, they are they are one or two generations before me. So by the time I grew up there was a lot of Italians that were able to build a social place, a physical building. I was in the Italian chorus for almost 10 years, and I was in that participating in the annual events where La Nonna would do the cannelloni, and it was amazing, right? And we would, because most of the founders of that community were also on the chorus, so that was kind of the activity. And then every year we would do this lavish dinner, and we'll invite everybody, and then we'll do a concert, and we will raise money to pay the it was all voluntary, right? But we'll raise money to pay for the director, right? Which it was the only person that would collect a salary, right? Because it was a prestigious role. So we wanted to have a really good director, right? And then we would go to different churches and different places, schools, to do concerts, right? So it was me, my parents, we were all involved in that. So anyway, that's even though I haven't been to Italy, I have a very very fond memories of Italians because of that, right? Yeah, I appreciate you talking about Italy, because now I remember all that. It has been a while since I have talked about that.
Right. California is a great state to be. I've been obviously in San Jose because I was working at Cisco, but the surroundings also are so wonderful. I have beautiful memories of California, of Lake Tahoe, of course, because I love lakes.
Right.
And that's really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean the nature there is so beautiful. I love it. Yeah, we walked across the Golden Gate Bridge 4 or 5 times already. Yeah, and when it's windy, it's so hard to do. But yeah.
Yes. And the fog is so mystic, though. I was born in Italy in a place on the northern Po Plain that is rather foggy in the winter. And so at San Francisco, I particularly felt at home because of all of this fog. So yeah, I find it so magic.
Yes. For me, the fog is something interesting because I mean, we didn't have that in Buenos Aires. We had more of fogs high on the sky, so we will not have it close to the ground, right? It was very unusual.
Yeah.
So going back to cigar tasting, right? Tell us a little bit more about what cigar tasting is about.
So I guess you're asking about Cigar Sense, so the company.
Sorry, Cigar Sense.
Cigar
Yes.
tasting as an action to enjoy cigars. I could talk about Cigar Sense. So what Cigar Sense is about is an online service that helps consumers make informed choices about the cigars. It provides personalized recommendations based on their individual preferences. So it's not like Netflix or Amazon that gives you recommendations based on, what other people who like this cigar have liked or have bought. We really look at the individual profile in details, and we have, on the other hand, a database with very detailed sensory profiles of all the cigars that we have run panel tests with, thousands. And we basically match every single cigar in terms of how it fits to each individual member through an algorithm. So I'm not the tech expert here. David, unfortunately, has not been able to be here, but understand this is a causality-based approach. So we are not working with big data nor AI. I know that AI is more probably in your direction, but this is actually what we do. And in the process of helping consumers understand what they really like or do not like in cigars and help them out of the myriad of cigars available on the market to pick, without wasting time and money, the ones that are most likely to be loved by them. In that process, we do two things. We educate from a sensory perspective, but also we serve manufacturers or companies, it can be distributors or retailers as well, supply chain companies who like to delight their customers, because we've done different type of things to serve, the industry actors, make their customers more happy. I want to specify, when we talk about data that we translate into insights, it's always strictly anonymized data. Obviously, privacy is very important for us. We had already applied GDPR before it even came into, action. It was mandatory from Europe. So what we do is we help companies better understand earlier in the process, before they even release the products, where they could best fit, in which market they are more likely to find more consumers that will appreciate them. So we do that and inform product development. We also help them manage their portfolio, because sometimes you launch lines, you launch cigars that might, put in danger some other lines, and it's all about a matter of how you communicate, yes. But if you find that, in terms of intrinsic qualities of the products, you can put this one next to this other one, but this one is very similar, actually, if you're really thinking about discontinuing, we can inform, we can help also through insights on the whole portfolio. And we can also help with sensory information on the products when released that can help people selling, ambassadors, using a sensory language that corresponds better to the reality of the cigar. Why do I say this is a big word? Reality and truth is something that sometimes I say, and I know it's tough words, but what happens today, like in many other luxury markets, is that it's very much driven by marketing and hype, which on one hand, it's great. And it's great that there's a lot of magazines and blogs, that talk about all these new releases we have, especially in the US. There's really a lot of releases. And that's great because that is the blood of the business. It keeps consumers engaged and interested in new products. The problem that we are trying to solve when I talk about more authentic profiles is that tasting is subjective. Perception is subjective. So you might like, I don't know, coffee with sugar, maybe a little bit of milk. I may like it unsweetened and black. And it's all fine because both taste very good. They're good. As long as the coffee itself is good, then they're both good, right? Taste is subjective, and there's so much excitement in the industry and among consumers about talking about what people actually perceive, what their experience is. And today we have even more platforms and opportunities to do that. The problem with the consumer who is looking to really have pleasure, to really, I don't want to waste my time and money trying all of the cigars that people are talking about, it becomes a little bit a problem. And so that's one of the reasons for which Cigar Sense exists, because I was one of them. I was one when I moved from Italy, where I had started to smoke cigars and I was more used to Cuban cigars. And I moved to the US where you cannot get Cuban cigars. I was lost. And although I thought I could describe cigars already, and then working with Cigar Sense, I have studied more sensory science, etc. But at that time already, I could tell what was wood, what was not, what was dried fruit in a cigar. And I was trying to explain it to the tobacconists, but it was not a common language. I was not understood. And so, this is something that sounds very simple, like everybody can write this cigar tastes like wood. But in the end, if it really tastes like wood, it is to be seen. And if the consumer doesn't find wood after having read the review, then the consumer gets confused. All of this information, therefore, is not a reliable predictor of whether people will like the cigars that they read about. So, in order to make it a reliable predictor, you need to work in the back end, in the process. And that's why we set up a sensory panel, and I'm now training the sensory panel. Tastings, even for a sensory panel, tasters, is subjective, and it will always be subjective. There's no way out. But it is the way, what you make out of the subjective tastings that becomes what is a reliable benchmark to match all of these individual detailed preference information from our members, and to inform company executives who need to take important investment decisions. And at stake, there's quite a lot. It doesn't seem so. It seems like, a nice to have. A lot of people buy just many cigars because they see that in social media and they want to try them. But the number of people who complain about the taste of cigars is extremely high. There's a lot of people that smoke premium cigars because of their flavor, the natural flavor. And so you don't want to be disappointed. Premium cigars. So when I talk about premium cigars, let me specify further. I'm talking about an agricultural, artisanal, traditional, handmade product that is fully rolled with full leaves of tobacco that has been cured, fermented, and then rolled, boxed, and shipped. It's a very natural product. There are also you can find them even at convenience stores, artificially flavored cigars, but this is not what we do. It doesn't make sense to pay panel tests, to invest so much in panel tests for a cigar that has already on the label vanilla, because we don't need to test it to tell consumers that tastes like vanilla. It's already written on the label. The problem is with the natural cigars that too many people just taste like tobacco. In fact, they are very different one from the other.
Right, right. I can relate that to, so I like alfajores, the dulce de leche, which is a very Argentinian traditional, uh, I sweet is it's not candy, it's a sweet, dessert, right? And here in Mexico they do something similar. They call it dulce de cajeta, which is based on goat, and in Argentina is based on cows, and it's almost the same, but it's not exactly the same. So I mean, I can understand that, and being away for so many years, you start missing those specific flavors, right? It's not like one is better than the other one. It's that I have a personal, emotional attachment with that specific flavor, right? So I can understand your, missing the Cuban cigars, right?
Yeah, there's also a lot of good cigars that I've learned to discover in the US. Newer cigars, they come from different countries, be it Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Honduras, and there's tobacco that comes from even more countries. Cigars are blends, and sometimes they're puros. We call them puros as well. So when they're made of tobacco coming entirely from one country, or they can be blends from, like wines, tobacco coming from different countries. And different varietals, especially. In wines, you find most frequently different varietals from the same country, of course. But yeah, so you have many different, and what we found in our journey is also that it's hard to differentiate cigars if you don't categorize them. That's how people normally try to help consumers find their way, and they categorize cigars by country of origin, tobacco types, price, shape, nicotine strength. And also, working with our data, we have found that even those categorizations are not necessarily reliable predictors for whether a person will like a cigar or not. You can say, I have smoked already a Connecticut shade wrap cigar. Connecticut shade is a particular type of wrapper that finishes the cigar. It has a peculiar flavor, but blended with other tobacco leaves, that peculiar flavor may be different than what you might expect when you think back of the Connecticut wrapped cigar that you have smoked in the past. And so, you might find something that is very different. You might find that cigar, the second cigar is much stronger in nicotine, or that it develops flavors that you don't like. It is too dry. It is less creamy than the first one. It has too much herb or too little wood. You can find many things because everything creates a harmony. It's not just about what you find, it's how intense it is, it's how it coexists with the other descriptors that you find. So, everything is important. And so you might be having this memorable product in mind. It is that particular leche. How did you say the leche?
Dulce de leche.
Dulce de leche.
Yes.
It might be a cigar. You have one in particular that you memorized, that emotioned you, and then you can find it. You try other ones, but no, that's not that. No, that's not that. So, yeah, that's a way to go.
Yes, and I can see how that, it's a harmony of all the flavors and all the, the combination what makes that specific flavor unique, right?
That's
And in that journey, when you're exploring, you want to find something that is similar to that on one direction or another, right? So having that more informed decision, right, allows you to explore those flavors. I think that's a much better experience, right?
yes.
I think that what I've seen that happens, and I've seen this happen in the auto industry, motorcycle industry, movies as well, right? But in particular, motorcycles and cars, what I've seen is that they You see people reviewing, journalists reviewing vehicles or reviewing motorcycles, and basically they say similar things, and they launch the reviews at pretty much the same time, right? And they don't say the cons of the product, right? Or they use this code where they don't say, something is wrong with a car or a motorcycle, but they talk about it in a positive way, right? And the reason for that is because there's a conflict of interest, because the ads that the magazine gets are from the automakers, right? So there's a relationship there that not always, but most of the time cause this conflict of interest, right? So I can see how that happens on the car industry. I've seen movies that the official reviewers rated low, but then people love it and they rate it high, right? And that has been happening more and more often. So that creates this, it undermines the trust that we can have to this, what used to be these authorities, right?
Critic. Yeah.
Critics, yeah. And the critics are
the critics' eyes.
yeah, the critics are supposed the ones that knows about this stuff. So
Yes.
we rely on their knowledge, right? But what happens when they have a conflict of interest? So now we cannot rely on them anymore, right? So I can see how your platform, based on sensory science, can help the buyers get a much more informed review.
Yeah, and the beauty of this, what it is, it's that any brand, regardless of the marketing budget, regardless of their relationship with us, can see their cigars highly recommended or lower in the ranking of a particular member simply because we don't care about all of that. We take that completely out of the equation. The algorithm works in the same way for every cigar and for every member. We cannot start to tweak it based on our interests or friendship with a given company. I mean, we couldn't manage it. We couldn't possibly manage it. You understand very well. I love impartiality, equality, and justice since I was a kid, for my personal history very much. And I love to see it in action here. There could be a very small manufacturer who doesn't even have money to place ads in specialized magazines, who makes a wonderful cigar. Okay, it may be a coincidence. They need to still prove how consistent the quality can be, but they're rewarded for the intrinsic qualities of their cigar, full stop. So that's what I love of what I'm doing. It is what it is. Data is what it is.
Right.
You don't tweak the data to be pleasant to somebody, but then, what do? You mess up all of your system? No, you don't do it. You invested so much.
Right. I can see that happening. Because I think it's something similar that happens in wine, right? That price on the wine doesn't set the quality of the wine, right? We can have expensive wine, but not, not very good quality, and sometimes you find really good quality wine at a really good price.
Yeah, you need to blind test. So one of
Right.
the typical practices when you have a panel is that you run blind tests. Now the thing is that there's many panels that run blind tests. What happens between the outputs of the tasters, of the panelists, and the editing and the publishing of reviews is something different. But if you have a system that shoots out in real time recommendations, you don't have the time to edit anything, right? You just throw out recommendations that are fit for the member who is looking at them, and they're there. The cigars are recommended. I wouldn't even think about how to change that. And
Right.
that's how where you just need to trust your algorithm and your data. It's been tested pretty much. Obviously, we keep improving things. Like I started recently to actually measure the performance of the panel, and I measured it over time, going backward with retroactive effect. I was looking at the past panelists we had, how they performed before we measured, and how they're doing today. We have introduced a lot more training. We refer to ISO sensory training for our panel. Yeah, the other important part of a sensory panel is the use of statistics, because you have to figure out, first of all, outliers. You have to have a number that is sufficient to figure out what the outliers are, of course. If I only smoke 3 cigars, it's hard, it's difficult. So we test at least 10 samples blind, and then we look at what are the outliers, what are the descriptors that are more frequently detected within each phase of the cigar. That's the exercise we do for the test. In reality, when we represent visually the profile, we figure it's not really that important to be able to even tell if cedar wood comes up at the start or at the end. In terms of the actual experience, it is important because it's all you sit down and enjoy and relax from. But for us to give a reliable prediction, it's not important if cedar will appear during a certain phase of the smoking. Yeah, those are the 3 pillars of the sensory panel. So blind tests, sufficient number of tests to apply statistics and use statistics, and training. The training and measuring the performance. And we see we've given tools to each panelist to actually improve themselves. They can look at how they have been doing in the past, how they have been improving, where they align less, on which descriptors they actually have been aligning less versus the rest of the team, so they can be aware of them, pay attention. And it doesn't mean that it's always that people don't detect wood, for instance. It's that sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and therefore you need to pay even more attention. But there is a trend. There is a trend that helps you improve.
Right. Yeah, I think that you were talking about the algorithm, right? So I think that the algorithm could be both used for unbiased or weaponize the algorithm, right? Study there was a study about how social networks detected that negative emotions in the conversations would increase engagement.
Yeah.
So then they would boost those type of posts that would generate controversy, negative emotions, and conflict with people, right? Because these organizations were looking to generate engagement. Now, you mentioned something that I find important, and the reason I'm talking about this is these companies were looking for engagement at all cost, right? And one thing that I find particularly interesting about how you describe Cigar Sense is that you are a value-based company, right? You're building an ethical business model. And I think that's the key differentiation that you guys have, because then you're building an algorithm that is going to provide the best recommendation for the user, right? With no hype, with no conflict of interest, with no other agenda, right? With no hidden agenda.
Right.
So I think that's the most, and based on sensory science, as we discussed before, right? So I think that's the most important take I takeaway that I get from hearing what Cigar Science is doing.
I'm so glad that you that you said it so clearly, because it's really our purpose. Ethics don't get you rich. That's why we are still, a very rare reality in the industry, because, well, people in the end want to make money. We have been bootstrapping from start, and I still believe in doing this, because I love to make people happy. I love to have joy myself, because I need to run the process before I buy some cigars myself as well. So of course, I can be involved in the testing. I can also test myself. I can try one and then decide, of course, but isn't it nicer to just go through your own process before making the best decisions that you can and have pleasure in your cigars? Yes, we believe that being consumer-centric is not easy. It's not easy. It's not very common. Even educational efforts can be tricky sometimes. There's some things that you come to realization as you work on your venture. For instance, there's the sensory language. That's right. And we use some of the descriptors I've mentioned. There's also some understandings of certain terms that really are prevailing in the whole industry, from professionals and consumers, that really make it difficult to even go into the more specific flavor language. I'll give you an example. Body. The term body in the wine language, it has a particular meaning, but the cigar tasting as an activity came from people who were wine sommelier and had experience with other products, right? Because there is no standard for cigar tasting. That's actually probably what I will continue create, because there is no standard. Everybody creates their own standard. It can be double, it can be different. But so body, we have run a survey and we have found at least 9 different meanings, but really huge differences in the meanings, because the term body, I use it to describe the canon, the actual physical body of the cigar. That's it. And otherwise, we ban it from any tasting or, analysis that we do. Exactly, because we don't want to be misleading, to be misunderstood. It can mean smoke density. It can mean flavor intensity. It can mean nicotine strength level. It can mean taste intensity. It can mean tactile sensation intensity, persistence. It can mean so many things. Complexity, people put evolution in it as well. It looks like in every particular lounge, maybe people understand one another, but you go to the next lounge and then already it's confusing. Those are things that are significant when companies start to educate, invite people to seminars to understand cigars, etc. If it's so confusing, upstream, how can it be downstream? So, clarity is important. It's not the most important thing for the businesses. I think that at stake there are different things here. I think that at stake there are, a lot of, if we talk in dollars, a lot of dollars that consumers leave on the table, because, it happened to me, it happens to others that talk to me. You buy 5 cigars and maybe you like 1 or 2 of them. It happens very frequently. Cigars have a cost, and it's a raising cost. They may be even $15 each. And if you smoke a cigar a day, it can easily get 5, 6 more thousands per year. Now, Cigar Sense costs $97 per month. Figure that out. In Canada, cigars cost even more than in the US, and there's where we have even more members in proportion because they save a lot more money every year. For companies, we had that case of a company, one of their cigars became the cigar of the year for cigar aficionado, and it stopped selling after 3 months. And they came to us with the question, what's going on? Help us understand why the cigar is not selling. And we did our work, the palate test, etc. We really double checked that we really wanted to be sure that the samples they sent us were from the same production lot as the samples that they had sent to Cigar Aficionado. Well, the palate test was clear. There was really a problem at the factory. They changed the factory in the meantime. Now it's all good. And they had already, of course, probably gathered some feedback from other consumers or from other reviewers. They kind of doubted already. They had our confirmation, they acted, and it was good. But imagine you put into the market a cigar, as a minimum, if you also produce tobacco, especially, it takes 2-3 years to make a cigar at the minimum, because some manufacturers have the tobacco fermented longer, or let them age in their aging rows. It can take a long time. It's money invested, and then you launch, and that's a high risk. And I have seen another company doing the launch like you were describing, actually, for cars, for other products too. I understand it happens, so it certainly happens in the cigar world. P&D, product developed, not tested with consumers or tested with a few friends. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, sure. And then you organize a so-called focus group, but it's actually not a real consumer focus group. It's gathering distributors, retailers, bloggers, media, friends, to really start the marketing machine. And all of that creates that positive hype that you were talking about. And then when the real critics come, if they come, it's late. It's late. The noise has already been on the positives, and there's no room. Nobody captures the negatives. So that's how the hype is actually not helping nor the consumer, but also not the businesses, because trust is built based on the perceived quality. And trust triggers loyalty, and loyalty triggers brand solidity, brand persistent, brand reputation. And, the example of the company that I was about to make was actually telling the story of when actually the product gets negative feedback immediately at that focus group that you have set up, so-called focus group. Somebody leaks some negative information. Not everyone, of course, it's not in the interest of everyone, but if somebody leaks soon enough, it's captured. They had to, pull back the product and then retry again. So these things harm the reputation, harm the brand. And if prices keep increasing because of production costs, because of more scarcity with tobacco, environmental problems, and because of tariffs now as well, the elasticity, even in the luxury industry, elasticity of consumers to price, you can play a little bit with that, but maybe not too much.
Right. The trust and the flavor, those are the key components for people choosing those products.
Yeah.
Right. And if they can trust on the brand, then there can be more price elasticity, right? People will be willing to pay a little bit more for a product they can trust, right?
Yes.
But if they cannot trust them, or if they don't know if what they're going to pay will meet their expectations, then there's little elasticity, and there is an issue of trust, right? I'm spending my money on buying something that is not going to fulfill what I expect,
Yes.
And yeah,
Yes.
and the long process, right? You mentioned years, right? So I think the relationship between cigar consumers and manufacturers is much more personal than, you know, any other products, because maybe wine, I guess, right? But or whiskey, right?
Yeah.
um, but with vehicles or other products, it's more of ubiquitous, right? But here it's more of the flavor. It's a much more personal and subjective
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they do sensory analysis on cars as well, on how it feels,
Yes.
the wheel, the seats, etc. They do that. But it's true. The senses that help us enjoy food are so important, and they're so connected, especially olfaction is so connected to our emotions that they really play together, creating flavor. And they really play a very important role. You're right. As you were saying, you're totally right. Yes.
So we talk a little bit about the ethical business model and making value-based and ethical organization. There is a price to pay for that, right? Uh, um, the same way that organizations or people that decided to just talk positive things about the product, right? On both decisions, there is a price to pay. Given now that you've been bootstrapping for many years and you've seen the price you paid, right? Would you make decisions of staying ethical all over again?
I believe, yes, I would probably seek a better life-work balance because I've really put days and nights into this. And I probably now deserve also to take it a little bit more relaxed, but I'm not giving up. No, I think I'm lucky. I'm lucky. Was I a single working woman with 2 children or 3 to bring to school, I probably would have taken a different decision.
Right.
I have some other skills too that I'm not fully using here, program management. I mean, there are skills that you can try and, use again. And I probably would have given up earlier. But yeah, I consider myself lucky because I'm able to pay the bills. I'm able to pay the bills, and I can even, do some business travel, and I can do what I believe is necessary, and even more after all of these challenging years. It's not the time to give up now. It's not the time to give up now. I mean, no, no, no. I want to continue. Actually, I want to continue creating standards, and I want to continue creating value for both consumers and companies because I believe in it. Purpose is what counts, really. I was recently reading a book. He's Italian. Maybe nobody here among your listeners, and nor you know it. Paolo Iabichino. He's been a very popular not so much, but very skilled and very effective ad designer. He has been designing campaigns for emergency, I guess, for very important profits and non-profits. Yeah, he wrote the last book that I read of him is Civil Writing. It is all about giving up some consensus for purpose. And I think it's very important because today we're measuring a lot. We're measuring a lot of following, a lot of activity, engagement that to a certain extent is good. It opens to different worlds. It helps us connect with people we didn't know before. It's good. But what really makes a difference, what is worthwhile for people, is it that, or is it having, finding their own way to relax and have pleasure in the case of cigar? But it's not only for the case of cigar, it's for anything else. Anything else. I think purpose is the most important thing. And yes, I would do it again.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I think that having your mission and that mission tied to your purpose, I think that means that no sacrifice is enough to keep that mission going, right? And I think that's admirable.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
It warms my heart. When people tell me, wow, you really, what you immediately recommended is really telling me that you're getting it right. Or, businesses seeing value in what we do. This is really, this helps moving forward. This is the reason for which I continue.
Yes, because and that's why I started a podcast talking about people, reshaping our world, because I think this type of missions, are important, because they do have an impact on the world, and because it's tied to your purpose, then you're going to pursue it, right? No matter the cost, right? Eventually, there's a cost enough that we might not, but it's the threshold is so high that I think that's commendable, right? And and you're changing people's life, right? By giving
What's
them,
your necessity? I mean, you may say
giving the
cigar is
value.
not a
Yeah.
necessity. I'm not dealing with food, but there's a cigar can ruin your mood, can ruin a few hours of your time. And if you look at the opposite, a cigar can enhance your life for a couple of hours whenever you choose. The good thing of the cigars we deal with is it's not addictive unless, you find people who really get, I mean, I've seen some lighting one after another, but in general,
Yeah,
the
but
average,
it's a social issues, not the mechanism of the cigar.
yeah, I can stay a month or two without smoking if I want. And, you know, it's okay. My body doesn't really request. It's my mind that
Right.
might request it, but it's not really my body.
I mentioned I'm co-authoring a book about creativity. I'm doing the Spanish version, and one of the things that we talk about on this book is about rest, and that talks about sleeping, right? It's mostly about sleeping, recovering, right? But I can argue that there's also, and you mentioned cigar is not a necessity. I agree it's more of a luxury, but I think it has an important role because I remember this TV show, Boston Legal, where at the end of every episode they sit down and they have a cigar right on the balcony with a beautiful view, right? So I think that's the value, in those ceremonies, right? When we want to celebrate, we want to rejoice of achieving, doing something, having that moment. I think that's the value of cigars, right?
Yes.
It could be cigars, it could be whiskeys, could be, it, depending on the people. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that um, it's the companion of the celebration, right?
Yes.
And that could be enhanced or ruined with the wrong cigar.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The cigars have been going through different roles and rituals over time. For the Mayans, for instance, they had a spiritual role, and then they became like, so they had a social role when smoked in Europe, bourgeoisie, smoking cigars, and then they became an identity. They had a role of identity as well, which they still have a lot today, status symbol, and also resilience. I mean, there were people fighting in wars that had a cigar to, recompound, together and, show, hey, we're still alive, we're there, let's move on after tough times. And they had an important role there too. And today, I believe that it has, because we don't, time is one of the most precious resources we have. Relax and dedicated time, mindful, going back to the senses, is a big is part of the big role that, if you leave luxury aside, cigars can have.
Yeah, and the is this refresh of hope, right?
Yeah.
these Zen moments, right, where we can just enjoy life a little bit, just have a small, celebration, even if, as you mentioned, in war situations, everything is so stressful, right? Having this
Yeah.
moment where you can celebrate,
Yes.
and that refresh your strength to carry on, right? So yes, I think that's an important role.
It is. It is very much. Yes.
So Franca, thank you very much for joining us today. Any last remarks before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, it was so good to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I mean, I would continue for forever, but I really thank you and I respect your time and the time of the listeners.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I think your story is amazing, and I I I relate to, we were talking about before starting the episode about me and my wife are co-founders, and I can relate to you and your husband being co-founders. So I find that very interesting, and I find your mission very interesting as well. And I wish you, the best success. Yes.
Thank you so much, Federico. You're doing really something great with your podcast. It's really so interesting to hear the stories of all of these different people that you invite. Your podcast is so different from what I, normally am used to. So that's really great. Thank you very much. You make it very human, very human. And it's a lot based on connection. Yeah, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you.